The Ethics Center, as you know, is performing a very critical function in this day and age. They are trying to, in many respects, advance our understanding of different cultures, different religions, to increase the literacy level so that we can be much more sophisticated, much more nuanced in our understanding and discourse with each other. A lot of misunderstandings that we have emanate from misinformation and disinformation. So the kind of work that this kind of forums do is to really elevate our literacy level so we can engage with each other with a sense of civility, with a sense of respect, and with a sense of mutual enrichment. That is to say, is that there's something that I can gain from you by this dialogue, and there's something that you can contribute. There is no notion of I possess everything. There's no notion of a monopoly, that I have the monopoly of the totality of all knowledge, and here I am going to be, giving you something. It is a synergistic effect, and I think this is a critical point for all religions, especially to understand that nobody has possession of paradise. Nobody can say, I own paradise. Can anybody claim that? Are you giving title of deeds to anyone? No. Nobody has monopoly over the truth. Nobody has monopoly over salvation, and therefore it would be arrogant, really, for anyone to say that I am guaranteed salvific efficacy, but not you. How dare? That's the height of spiritual arrogance for someone to make those kind of claims. Humility brings about a sense of appreciation, a sense of acknowledgement that the other side can contribute something to me. And without that kind of humility, the world that we live in cannot become a better world. And I think this is a core. A core principle is to accept that I don't have monopoly over the truth, I don't possess the truth, and I cannot claim to possess paradise. I was joking around with one gentleman, and I said, if somebody can provide me a key of BMW, model number 3 I like, I will give him the key to paradise and a visa, multiple entry visa. And lo and behold, it was an Iranian gathering, the gentleman got up and he put the key on the table. He said, this is yours. And I said, listen, I'll keep this. There are witnesses here. And I have every intention, because I like BMW, and professors, as you know, don't make that much money, right? Not like directors in hospitals. I said, I'll keep it. He said, fine. It was the month of fasting, and after we had broken the fast and shared the bread, he came to me and said, I want my key back. And I said, but you just given it to me, and I'm going to give you the key to paradise, right? As if I own it. And he said, no, you had mentioned that you just wanted someone to give you the key. You had not said you want the car. He was a lawyer, right? Anyways, I had to give the key back, and I could not give him the key to paradise. But in any event, who speaks for Islam means that you have to be humble. The moment you say that I speak for Islam, I know the truth, I am the only authoritative interpreter of the Quran, as Brother Irfan mentioned, Mr. Irfan Ali, is that yes, the Quran is a verbatim word of God. We Muslims accept this as the authoritative piece that has not been tampered with, not changed, not altered, and so on. So the Quran as a text is certainly static, it's constant. What comes in the picture is human interpretation. Human minds, depending upon their assumptions, depending upon how they have been socially conditioned, they will arrive at different understandings of the same literal verse. It has happened throughout history. Even till today, contemporary Muslims who are in tension with each other and struggling with each other, well, they say we all believe in the Quran. But the problem is, when the mental capacity begins to engage the Quran, you have brought in subjectivity. There is no more objectivity left. The human mind engages in trickery. And depending upon your particular mindset, your particular worldview, you are certainly going to impose that kind of a projection on the text. And it's beyond a shadow of doubt. In the academy we all brag that, listen, if you want to have an objective study of religion, you should come to the academy. And then if you want to have a subjective understanding or the insider's view of religion, go to a theological seminary. It is not so much the case. There is no such thing as 100% objectivity. What you can do in the academy, in a non-advocacy atmosphere, where the intention of the academy is not to convert people, but to just elevate our literacy level to become better human beings, to be able to understand each other, to be able to enrich from each other. And therefore, the claim that the academy makes is a claim that cannot be sustained. To say that we are 100% neutral is not feasible. It's not humanly feasible, because every human being does come in with his own biases. I have my own prejudices. I have my own, all kinds of things that I bring as my baggage before I even engage in trying to understand what the text is saying. Assuming the text is authoritative, even then, there is no such notion as 100% objectivity. And it's very clear in the academy, if you see the kind of clashes we have in the academy, there are scholars who are on one side of the opinion, there are scholars on the other side. And many a times, if I have a particular opinion, I will not accept students. And I am sure the academicians will confirm that we have our own biases, that we will not accept the applicant who somehow is dissenting from our opinion. We want someone who is somehow conforms to us, right? We all have these particular biases. So the issue of who speaks for Islam is an extremely relevant one, I think, especially given that there are many claimants. There are many people who claim that we are the authoritative representatives of Islam. We are the ones who will teach you the pure Islam. We are the ones who know the authentic Islam. We are the ones who can teach you that unadulterated Islam of the Holy Prophet of the 7th century. All these claims are hollow claims. All these claims cannot be sustained. When the Arab Spring was happening, one of the banners that they used to have is Islam huwa al-hal. Islam is the panacea. Islam is the universal cure. But if you probe them further and you say, what do you mean Islam is a solution? They don't know. What they know is in totality somehow this particular myth, there's some kind of a romantic understanding that there is this Islam, the ideal Islam floating somewhere up there. If only Muslims can snatch it and rediscover it, they will again have the zenith of civilization. It is just a figment of imagination. No such thing of an ideal Islam is floating around anywhere, because we cannot read the mind of God. The mind of God is something that we can only guess, we can only predict and try to figure it out. So there is no such thing as a person who can argue and advocate that I'm going to speak for that pure Islam and teach you what Islam is all about. Rather, one can say with humility that there is a spectrum of views from one polarized end to the other, and these particular interpretations began right from the death of the Prophet. There was a dispute amongst the Muslim companions themselves. Imagine, the Prophet is just breathing his last breath, and you have diversity of opinions, you have dissent, and you say, how is it possible? The Prophet was right there. Even then, you see, the issue of interpretation always interjects when you don't have an authoritative figure who can claim infallibility. From that time of the Prophet in the 7th century until now, we have multiplicity of views, multiplicity of interpretive communities. All these communities can claim that we are presenting one understanding of Islam, but they cannot claim exclusivity. They can say, yes, my best understanding from my own research and my own understanding and my own tradition says, for me, this is the most likely understanding of Islam, but he or she has no right to impose that understanding of Islam as somehow authoritative or authentic or final. This would be an act of arrogance. So what we can say is that there is not one Islam. Rather, one can argue there is one ideal Islam floating somewhere which nobody has access to. Human beings don't have access to the ideal Islam, the capital I, but rather there are multiple Islams that we are trying to discover and trying to approximate the ideal Islam. The good thing also in Islam is that there is no notion of orthodoxy. There's no notion of a clerical class who can say, the ecclesiastical class who can say, this is the true Islam, although we do have certain boundaries that if you go outside of those boundaries, the scholars can excommunicate you. I don't know what that means, to excommunicate you. Anyways, it is in this context of spectrum that we have Sunni Islam, we have Shia Islam, we have Sufi and mystical Islam, and all of them have a valid claim to speak on behalf of one possible interpretation of Islam. Acknowledging this fact, what I just said, that there is this multiplicity of Islam, should bring about a sense of complexity in the debate. When you bring in complexity, then you know that you have to be far nuanced and sophisticated in how you understand the present-day crisis in the Muslim world and the rise of radical and extremist Islam who claim to speak on behalf of Islam. I didn't time myself. So how many minutes do I have? Have I used 5 minutes? Okay. You know, if you ask an Iranian gathering, you know, how much time do I have? They say, oh, speak until the night is over. It's part of, you know, etiquette. But they mean finish it up. You know, just like, you know, there's a part of etiquette of what we said, ta'aruf and acts of civility. But, so, you know, be very careful. If you go to Iran, let's say, I'm joking around as well, of course. Iranians are very, very hospitable, but they will always invite you. Even a taxi driver will say, you know, since you are a visitor, please come to my house. Well, he's saying it out of kindness. Doesn't mean you should impose upon him and go to his place. In any event, the rise of radicalism that we are seeing today and the phenomena of extremism, you must remember, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You know, every ideology influences and is also influenced by a variety of factors, social, economic, and political factors. It is complex. And therefore, if you want to try to understand the phenomena of how come these things are happening around the world, you have to have a degree of sophistication. And that means you must take classes of Professor Biondo and Professor Fiala and other classes of the academics, and also take classes from other traditional places as well. You need multiplicity of perspectives. Don't take any authoritative figure as the end point. Thus, to understand the phenomena, you have to take into account the impact of colonialism, the impact of nationalism in the Muslim world, the impact of invasions, the impact of tyranny and despotism that we have in the Muslim world, where there is no notion of democracy. People have no outlet to express their disagreement. The only outlet that they have is violence. If you don't have a peaceful way of expressing your disagreement and dissent, and there is no peaceful way of transforming the system of governance, what do? You are taught to be violent. The Muslim world is also very much angered that there is no resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that has been ongoing for many, many, many years. The Muslims feel humiliated. They feel there is a lack of education. There is grinding poverty in the Muslim world, although in spite of all this wealth, there is lack of education. There's also a sense of hopelessness. You know, when you are in a state of despair and you are hopeless, you can do things that are completely, you might regard as abnormal, insane. In a state of despondency, in a state of hopelessness, in a state where you are angry, where you are full of resentment and grievances, you can do very wrong things. It is in this context that we should try to understand the extremist groups like Al-Qaeda, Taliban, ISIS, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and others who claim to speak on behalf of Islam. As you know, they have pronounced the majority of the Muslims as being unbelievers. You know, they have said that shedding the blood of Muslims, and you will see the majority of the victims of all these extremist groups are actually Muslims because they are viewed as unbelievers. They have also targeted Christians, Yazidis, and other minorities and unbelievers. The claim for the justification of these horrific crimes, they claim they are following the Quran, the same Quran that Irfan mentioned that we have as a verbatim text. They say we are following the prophetic literature. They say we are following the conduct of the early Muslim community. However, their abhorrent and inhumane actions are diametrically opposed to the scripture of the Muslims, which regards human life as sacrosanct. Islam regards, the Quran regards human life as so precious. If you take one life away unjustly, you have actually annihilated, in the view of the Quran, the whole of humanity. The Quran accommodates different religions and non-religious communities and does not allow for any force to convert people. What these extremist groups have done is to couch their protests and their grievance in a religious discourse. They're very angry, they're very upset, they're full of resentment. They are trying to use religious symbolism, religious vocabulary, religious language in order to recruit people for their own particular agenda. One of the claims that they make is they want to go back to the Sharia, and this is my final point. They want to go back and re-establish what they call this Sharia. The term itself has become a toxic term in the West because it is manipulated and misunderstood by different demagogues who have particular vested interests. We have elections coming up, and many statements are being made that are so irresponsible in any event, such is the case. But the idea is that you guys will be able to elevate the discourse level. In any event, the Sharia, in closing, the Sharia does not mean the punishment that you see, the corporal punishment. The Sharia does not mean stoning. The Sharia doesn't mean, all these kinds of things, cutting the hand of the theft. That is not the meaning of Sharia. The Sharia, what it represents are the ideals. What are the ideals? The ideals of justice, fairness, equity, human dignity, equality. All these things are part and parcel of the ideals of the Sharia, which says you should protect life, preservation of family, preservation of religion, preservation of property, preservation of environment, preservation of human dignity. This is part and parcel of Sharia. These are moral, ethical principles. Sharia is moral, ethical principles. What you do have is laws that are derived from the Sharia, but the laws which are derived from the Sharia are supposed to be time-bound and context-bound, and they should evolve. Therefore, in today's era, there should be no punishment like cutting off the hand of the thief. Punishment is there to provide us security and safety and to be a punitive measure. But punishment in that form should no longer exist. The Quran does not endorse that the punishment is sacred. What the Quran says is that there should be peace and safety and security. So anyways, the core of the Sharia is the moral, ethical principles. And then you will say, well, in that case, if you say Islam is all about ethics and morality, what's happening around the world, how does it measure up? It doesn't. What's happening around the world by all these kinds of groups, what's happening in Kenya, how can forget about any religion or non-religious ideology, have any kind of justification for this kind of horrific, unspeakable, inhumane crimes? There is none. And therefore, there is nothing that the Quran has to support this kind of horrific acts. The Quran has categorical statements condemning and denouncing this kind of inhumane and unspeakable crimes against humanity, whether it is in Kenya, whether it is in, we saw a number of Christian people being slaughtered, was it in Syria, was it? By the ISIS and so on. We have all these kind of horrific crimes. So who speaks for Islam? I think no one. This is the ideal. But I think there are authoritative people who can help us in trying to understand a possible understanding of Islam, and hopefully in the Q&A we'll have a chance to learn from you as well. Thank you so much.